Translator, Ninetales. Editor, Dark Gem. Overlord Body? Eternal Peace, Imperial Preceptor felt slightly bewildered. When he pondered over it, he realized he had never once heard of such a constitution before, so his gaze turned toward Village Chief with uncertainty in his eyes. Overlord Body sounded far superior to the four great spirit bodies, yet could this world truly possess a constitution that stood above the four great spirit bodies? If such a thing truly existed, why had he never heard of it before? And judging from the current situation, it seemed that there were even two of these overlord bodies walking beneath the heavens. Village Chief's facial muscles twitched faintly, as though the skin of his face might peel away at any moment. His expression had loosened so many times that it almost looked as if his face was merely waiting for the right moment to drop off entirely. Overlord Body again. Muer, this little rascal, truly refuses to keep quiet. He could not help but sigh bitterly in his heart. He had indeed grown old. A mere small lie like this could make his heart tremble with unease, constantly fearing that it might be exposed. Yet who could possibly expose him? As the previous human emperor, he had merely spoken a harmless white lie. So why must he torment himself like this? Why must he constantly rack his mind, thinking of ways to cover up the lie? Ever since I fabricated this overlord body constitution, the number of lies I've told has surpassed all the lies I spoke in the past 800 years. Village Chief steadied his spirit and shook his head. Muer, there can never be a second overlord body. This Xushengua is absolutely not an overlord body. Qinmu looked puzzled, and Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was no different. Cripple clenched his fists in excitement. As the only person who knows the existence of the overlord body, the Village Chief normally never breathes a word about it to anyone. But today he is finally going to reveal some of its secrets. Village Chief's expression was calm as he spoke slowly, his tone neither hurried nor slow. It appears to have been the will of heaven that in every generation there can only exist a single overlord body. Those who resemble it are merely pseudo-overlord bodies, never the genuine one. Since the beginning of time, this has always been the rule. In every era beneath heaven, there can only be one person who possesses the true overlord body. You must remember this clearly. Eternal Peace, Imperial Preceptor, could not conceal his astonishment. The only overlord body beneath heaven, all the rest merely pseudo-overlord bodies? The mysteries of this world were indeed far deeper than he had ever imagined. Village Chief's words stirred both alarm and excitement within him. The will of heaven, the singular overlord body, the pseudo-overlord bodies, behind these words seemed to lie an indescribable power quietly governing all things. Cripple did not think too deeply about it and simply said excitedly, "Just as I guessed, there is only one true overlord body in this world." Qinmu felt a trace of excitement as well, yet doubt soon crept into his heart. But Xushenghua's cultivation is no different from mine. To stand in the same realm as me, he can only also be an overlord body. There can only be one explanation for that, Village Chief said with a solemn expression. That is because you have not been working hard enough. As the overlord body, yet you allow the four great spirit bodies or even a pseudo-overlord body to catch up with you. You should feel ashamed and reflect upon yourself. Qinmu nodded heavily and replied with great seriousness, "Grandpa Village Chief, please rest assured, I will definitely work even harder. Now that I think about it, I truly have been somewhat lazy these past few days. If I continue improving, Xushengua will also improve, but if I slack off, he might truly surpass me." Village Chief secretly relaxed, thinking inwardly, Muer is still far too innocent. With just a few words, I can trick him into working even harder. If this brat ends up losing to Xushengua, he will definitely believe it's because he wasn't diligent enough. That way, next time I will have even more excuses to use. Eternal Peace, Imperial Preceptor's gaze flickered as he asked sincerely, "Dao brother, you mentioned both the overlord body and pseudo-overlord bodies. Since they are spoken of together, there must be some connection between them. Would you mind explaining the details?" Village Chief's eyes instantly widened. Qinmu was easy to deceive, and Cripple was no different since he only cared for stealing and knew little about the martial world. But Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was an entirely different kind of person. Cough, cough. The relationship between the Overlord body and pseudo-Overlord bodies lies within the struggle over fate, Village Chief said solemnly. There is only one Overlord body in this world, and there can only ever be one. However, there may be many pseudo-Overlord bodies. I once heard a legend which claimed that if a pseudo-Overlord body were to kill the true Overlord body, they could seize its destiny and transform from a pseudo-Overlord body into the genuine Overlord body. As for whether this legend is true, I do not know. Eternal Peace, Imperial Preceptor, fell into deep thought before raising his head and saying, "The struggle over fate between the Overlord body and the pseudo-Overlord bodies is indeed unsettling. However, how would a pseudo-Overlord body know which person is the true Overlord body? If they do not know who the Overlord body is, how could they possibly kill him?" Village Chief grew furious inwardly. Was this fellow finished or not? How was he supposed to continue fabricating the story? Between the Overlord body and the pseudo-Overlord bodies there exists an unimaginable connection. When the two encounter one another, they will sense each other's presence. Village Chief steadied his mind and continued. From the moment they meet, they will feel admiration for each other's talent, yet at the same time they are natural enemies, destined to fight until their last breath. Just as he was running out of ideas on how to continue, Chinmu's eyes suddenly lit up. He clapped his hands in surprise. When I first met Xu Shenghua, I felt exactly that kind of sensation. No wonder, no wonder. We first met on the river while he was sitting upon a pleasure boat. At that time he stopped the boat upon seeing me and invited me aboard. So that must have been because of the connection between the Overlord body and the pseudo-Overlord bodies. Eternal Peace, Imperial Preceptor, no longer doubted the matter. He lifted his head and gazed toward the heavens in a daze. Xu Shenghua comes from high heavens, and the god I encountered who sent the disaster was also from high heavens. What kind of place is that? To possess gods and even an Overlord body? Dao brother, you should know about that place, right? They are merely false gods. Village Chief also raised his head and looked toward the azure sky. To their west raged an incomparably brutal battlefield, yet none of them paid it any attention, showing no concern for what was happening there. High heavens is nothing more than a nest of lackeys. They are simply the eyes planted by the gods to oversee this world, Village Chief said softly. The snow disaster that struck your Eternal Peace Empire left the people in dire straits, and even now the land has not fully recovered. But the disasters sent by high heavens are merely ordinary meteorological assaults. If a true god were to send disaster upon you, hey! He withdrew his gaze and continued. The East Sea is 30,000 yards deep, yet it sank in a single night. The eastern region of the Great Ruins was once an ocean, but overnight it became land and towering mountains. Eternal Peace. Imperial Preceptor's hair stood on end. I have battled high heavens throughout my entire life, and they are far from easy opponents, yet the existences standing behind high heavens are even more terrifying. Village Chief looked toward the places where his arms and legs had once been severed and fell into silence. He murmured quietly, "You will meet them one day. Moore will also meet them." Eternal Peace. Imperial Preceptor looked toward the places where the old man's limbs had once been. The scars left by a sword might appear ordinary to others, but to him, the sword god of this generation, those wounds contained boundless profundity. He knew clearly just how terrifying the person who had severed Village Chief's limbs must have been. High heavens will once again send disaster upon Eternal Peace. Village Chief released a trembling breath and continued. However, their primary enemy is still the human emperor. I fought them for several hundred years, yet now I only have 2 or 3 years of life remaining. But now there is you, who has comprehended the sword path, and you can stand against them. In the future there will also be Mu'er. Now that I have stepped out of the Great Ruins, visitors will soon come seeking me within the next few days. I will fight them once more. His tone sounded calm and indifferent, yet the 3 listeners could hear the faint resolve hidden within his voice. A human emperor cannot die in bed. Village Chief revealed a gentle smile and said softly, "A bed is not the place where I shall rest." Eternal Peace. Imperial Preceptor raised his head once more and said softly, "High heavens, One day, the cavalry of my eternal peace will trample that place beneath their hooves, but first we will trample Helan Pass." He rose to his feet and said, "Everyone, please proceed to Helan Pass." A treasured carriage rolled forward and arrived at the top of the city walls. Chin-Mu lifted village chief and carefully placed him within the treasured carriage, while Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor took the reins and drove the carriage with a smile. "Let us continue this conversation at Helan Pass." Cripple picked up the golden book from the table and tossed it back toward Chin-Mu. "Grandmaster's book. Who knows what kind of wicked and sinister techniques are recorded inside?" Chin-Mu caught the golden book and shook his head. "This does not belong to Grandmaster. It is a book from my Qin family that he stole." Cripple snorted coldly. "Mua, you are definitely not hard-working enough. After learning my heaven-pilfering son's switching hand, how could you still be robbed by that brat? You might as well remain the second greatest divine thief in the world." "I already said I wanted to remain number 2. It was you who insisted on pushing me to number 1. Chin-Mu opened the golden book and exclaimed in astonishment. "Pan Gong-so actually managed to open this book. It was originally sealed. That's right, Grandpa Village Chief, I have finally met my father." Village Chief's mind exploded like thunder. He cried out in shock. "You have encountered people from Carefree Village?" Chin-Mu set the golden book down, sorrow faintly appearing upon his face. "I met him aboard the treasured ship in Ghost Valley, but he had already used a forbidden technique and turned himself into a tree man. He had signed the Pact of Earth Count with Saturn's Sovereign, so he could not open his eyes to look at me. He taught me many things, yet we still had to part ways." Chin-Mu stared blankly ahead before shaking his head and casting aside the chaotic thoughts in his mind. He told them of his experiences within Ghost Valley and the world of Yudu, leaving the 3 listeners completely dumbfounded. Such strange encounters stirred both longing and fear within their hearts. The many terrifying secrets hidden within the treasured ship left them stunned. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was deeply shaken. Not only was Chin-Mu the overlord body, he even possessed a father who resembled a god. How do the people of Carefree Village become gods? Eternal Peace. Imperial Preceptor suddenly recalled that the divine bridges of the people from Carefree Village were connected directly to the celestial heavens. The people of Little Jade Capital had once told him that the divine bridges of everyone in this world had been severed. Everyone except for the people of Carefree Village, whose divine bridges remained connected to the celestial heavens. Did that not mean that Chin-Mu's divine bridge would also connect him to the celestial heavens? He turned back to look at Chin-Mu, yet the youth seemed completely unaware of what he was contemplating. Instead, Chin-Mu had picked up the golden book once again and flipped through it. Ahead of them, the fleet of flying ships had already crushed everything that stood in their path and was rapidly approaching Helan Pass. The Duck Tong Zone was now filled with the corpses of barbarian divine arts practitioners who had been slain by the True Origin cannons. Sword Hall, Master Jian Sansheng and General of Guide Commander Yu Yuan Chuyu wielded the flying ships as thought they were swords. These 2 masters of the sword path commanded the fleet of flying ships to slaughter the prairie army. Within the time it took for a single stick of incense to burn, the barbarian army had collapsed. With their will to fight shattered by the 14,000 True Origin cannons, they fled back toward Helan Pass like a raging flood. What followed was nothing more than a one-sided massacre. Even though the Shaman Kings and the various Khans struggled with all their might, they could not halt the surging tide of soldiers fleeing back into the pass. Eternal Peace. Imperial Preceptor drove the carriage slowly. The timing was calculated precisely, so that by the moment Sword Hall Master captured Helan Pass, the carriage would arrive within the city. Inside the carriage, Chin-Mu stared seriously at the first page of the golden book. Suddenly he stood up. Vital chi surged forth from his fingertip, transforming into countless rulers, circular rulers, square rulers, triangular rulers, and semicircular rulers. Each one possessed different angles and measurement systems to calculate the blueprint drawn on the first page. "Mu'er, what are you doing?" Cripple asked curiously. "Measuring the Magpie Bridge," Chin-Mu replied without lifting his head. "The technique recorded within this golden book of my Qin family is somewhat strange. If I wish to cultivate it, I must calculate every single corner of the vital chi within this blueprint perfectly. This diagram might be... It might be. Translate Ninetales, editor Dark Gem. What is it? Cripple asked, his brow creasing with bewilderment. Chinmu stroked his chin thoughtfully, then plucked out a strand of beard hair as he spoke. I believe the techniques recorded in this book detail the method to connect the Divine Bridge. Cripple hadn't heard clearly. His ears twitched as he leaned closer and asked, What bridge? Divine Bridge. Chinmu continued taking measurements as he spoke, his movements calm and deliberate. Divine treasures are not like the meridians within the human body, which lie plainly in place, so one may execute a technique with a single glance. Divine treasures are empty spaces. When vital chi flows within them, every single millimeter exists within a different dimension. Thus, I must measure the precise dimensions. Determining spatial coordinates is extremely difficult, and the slightest carelessness will lead to an error. Cripple's face remained blank as he stared at Chinmu, who had already switched to a different scale and continued measuring the illustration within the Golden Book. Chinmu then took out brush and paper, swiftly recording the data from his measurements. Without even lifting his head, he continued, If there is even the slightest mistake in the dimensions, the smallest error at the digits of Mohu is no different from a deviation of 1,000 miles. My calculations must be exact, extending all the way to the digits beyond Mohu. Furthermore, the size of the human body depicted in this painting differs from that of a real human body. The size of the divine treasure shown here also differs from the divine treasures within a real person, so I must first calculate the underlying numerical values. Everyone's divine bridge. Divine treasure differs in size, but once the base numerical values are obtained, cultivation can proceed according to ratios. In that case, one would be able to cultivate the secrets of Magpie Bridge. Cripple blurted out once more, What bridge? Chinmu looked puzzled for a moment before smiling. Magpie Bridge. Grandpa Cripple, you seem rather dazed today. I won't continue speaking with you. This section here is troublesome to calculate and extremely difficult. I will likely need a very long time. Suddenly, Village Chief's head popped into view. His expression carried excitement as he asked eagerly, What bridge? Now Chinmu was even more bewildered. Village Chief, are you dazed as well? Magpie Bridge. That's not it. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor suddenly turned around and spoke urgently. That's not it. Before Magpie Bridge, you clearly said Divine Bridge. That's right, Cripple immediately exclaimed. I also heard Divine Bridge. Village Chief nodded repeatedly, his beard trembling. It was Divine Bridge. Only then did Chinmu come to a realization. He smiled faintly. The Divine Bridge of the man in this painting is broken. The technique he uses to repair it is called Magpie Bridge. I was merely calculating the mathematical reasoning required for the secrets of Magpie Bridge. This technique is extremely difficult to cultivate, and there are far too many variables that need to be measured. A technique used to repair the Divine Bridge. In an instant, the aura of the three men erupted like volcanic fury. The carriage that had been flying steadily through mid-air shattered into countless fragments. Those broken pieces then crumbled into powder under the terrifying vibrations released by their overwhelming aura. Chinmu instantly rose into the sky, clutching the Golden Book and the data he had measured tightly against his chest. Ink had spilled everywhere, dyeing his robes dark and messy. Eternal Peace. Imperial Preceptor, Village Chief, and Cripple almost lunged forward to seize the Golden Book. Yet the moment they saw Chinmu hugging it tightly to his chest, they halted and withdrew their hands, barely restraining the excitement surging wildly within their hearts. Luckily, this Golden Book is not afraid of being stained by ink. Otherwise, your sins would have been enormous, Chinmu grumbled. Village Chief immediately spoke. Land on the ground first. The four of them descended together. Everywhere around them lay corpses. In some places, blazing fires still raged as thick smoke billowed toward the heavens. These were traces left behind by fire divine arts. Meanwhile, the army of barbarian Dai Empire battered frantically against the gates of Helon Pass in desperate hopes of escaping inside, but the guards kept the city gates firmly shut, refusing to open them. They feared that if the gates opened, Eternal Peace Empire would seize the opportunity to invade. The defeated army smashed against Helan Pass like a raging tide. The towering walls crumbled continuously under the relentless assaults of numerous powerful practitioners, shattered rocks flying in all directions. What they managed to break through was merely the outer city wall, which had sufficient width. The inner wall, however, remained standing firm and unyielding. The soldiers guarding the city unleashed divine arts and spirit weapons toward the ground below, attacking indiscriminately, friend and foe alike. Those who had once fought side by side were now killing each other without hesitation. All manner of vulgar curses were hurled from beneath the city wall, turning the scene outside into a ghastly spectacle beyond description, the corpses below the city piled up into a grotesque mountain. Before Helan Pass, the fleet led by Sword Hall Master and Yu Yuan Chuyun halted 60 miles away and did not advance further. True Origin cannons fired continuously, blasting the city towers and gates into shattered ruin. In an instant, countless escapees surged into the city like a devastating flood. Inside the city, Pangong So's hands and feet turned ice cold. The city gate had been destroyed, and the defeated army was rushing into the city. Helan Pass no longer possessed any chance of halting the enemy's advance. The defeated army collided with the guards inside the pass, making it impossible to form orderly formations. Seeing the chaos, the guards also decided to flee. If the enemy seized this opportunity to charge in and massacre them with organized formations, the prairie would surely suffer a complete defeat. Bring me away immediately. Pangong So hardened his heart and commanded the Shaman King beside him. Abandon the city, retreat from Helan Pass. That Shaman King immediately lifted him up and flew out of Helan Pass. Along the way, Pangong So spoke sternly. Have the disciples of our Roland's Golden Palace withdraw from the battlefield. The Shaman King's heart trembled violently. His voice quivered as he asked, Grandmaster, if the disciples of Roland's Golden Palace retreat, the army will have no chance of survival. But Roland's Golden Palace will survive. Pangong So remained incomparably calm. If we defend here, the disciples of Roland's Golden Palace will only die within this city. We must preserve our strength. The true battlefield lies on the prairie. The reputation of our Roland's Golden Palace does not come from the respect and worship of the tribes. If Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor wishes to seize the prairie, he will have to pay an immense price. The Shaman King immediately gathered his vital chi and released a world-shaking shout that echoed across the battlefield. His command ordered all disciples of Roland's Golden Palace to retreat. After that, the situation plunged into even greater chaos. The army's morale completely collapsed, and everyone sought only to flee for their lives. They poured through the shattered city gates, trampling over those who had fallen beneath their feet. Some who had cultivated flying divine arts soared into the sky, only to be blasted down by the True Origin cannons. Yu Yuan Chuyun controlled the skies, preventing any divine arts practitioners of Barbarian D-Empire from escaping through the air. Sword Hall Master, meanwhile, controlled the ground. However, he did not block the people fleeing back into the pass. Instead, he wiped out every enemy before him on the land, forcing the remaining soldiers to flee even more frantically. Below the flying ships, the army of Eternal Peace Empire surged forward like a tidal wave, cleaning up the remnants scattered across the battlefield. Pangong So turned back and looked toward Helan Pass, which had already begun collapsing. Flames burned fiercely within the city as thick smoke billowed upward into the heavens. The soldiers of Barbarian D-Empire were all fleeing for their lives. Some attempted to climb Helan Mountain when they could not escape through the city gates, but most slipped and fell, their bodies crushed into gruesome meat paste. Numerous great shamans and shaman kings flew back and gathered around Pangong So. Fear and despair filled every face, yet Pangong So remained calm as he issued his orders. Immediately disperse and poison all water sources across the prairie with shaman poison. Let plague ravage the land. If the army of Eternal Peace Empire marches in, they will die miserably. Grandmaster, the hearts of the great shamans and shaman kings trembled violently. One shaman king sobbed as he spoke. All the tribespeople on the prairie will be poisoned to death as well. Pangong So remained indifferent. The prairie is vast enough. As long as we do not poison the large cities, a portion of the tribespeople will still survive. But there are so many small nomadic tribes. Pan Gong So's expression remained completely cold. Those are merely poor and lowly people. If they die alongside the divine arts practitioners of Eternal Peace Empire, it is worth it. Disperse immediately and poison the water. There can be no delay. Otherwise, once the army of Eternal Peace Empire arrives here, their first target will be Roland's Golden Palace. Most of the great shamans and shaman kings fell into stunned silence before dispersing in all directions. Pan Gong So overlooked Helan Pass, where smoke from the fires of war rose endlessly, shrouding the once impregnable stronghold that was now crumbling apart. He turned around and walked toward the Golden Palace, muttering softly to himself, "It has been so many years. 7,000 or 8,000 years, perhaps. My heart has long been like an ancient well, calm and without a single ripple. Yet this is the first time, is it not? The first time I feel the urge to struggle with all my might as I did in my first lifetime. Eternal Peace Empire, Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor, Heavenly Devil Cult Master, you have once again ignited my fighting spirit." On the battlefield, Qin Mu pushed several corpses aside and opened the Golden Book, allowing Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor, Village Chief, and Cripple to see its contents. The three heads crowded together, staring nervously at the writing and diagrams on the page while frantically calculating and memorizing every detail. Marvelous, truly marvelous. How did the people of Carefree Village conceive such an intricate method to connect the Divine Bridge in this manner? What terrifying computational ability would be required to calculate such precise markings before transforming them into a technique? The trio continued exclaiming in wonder until Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor finally said, "Brothers, may I turn the page? Magpie Bridge cannot be the only technique here. There must be other techniques on the next page. However, the calculations there will certainly be even more intricate and require the results from Magpie Bridge as a foundation." The Golden Book was turned to the next page, and another wave of astonished exclamations erupted. "It truly is the next technique calculated upon the basis of Magpie Bridge. Secrets of Mysterious Guide is astonishing. It is practically building a pavilion in the air. To calculate to this level, this is undoubtedly a divine calculation. This could not have been calculated by a single person. This technique must have gathered the wisdom of everyone in Carefree Village. Quick, 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 turn to the next page. Why are you looking at me? I have no hands." After the three of them studied it for quite a long time, distant explosions and cheers suddenly echoed across the land. Qin Mu lifted his head to look in that direction and coughed lightly. Helan Pass has been conquered. The trio did not say a word and continued reading the Golden Book. Qin Mu shook his head helplessly. "Shouldn't we head over there? The sky will soon grow dark. If we remain in Duck Tongue Zone, we will be in danger once the darkness invades during the night. This is the Great Ruins, after all." The trio remained silent. Qin Mu was bored to death. After waiting a while longer, he finally couldn't resist speaking again. "No matter how long you stare at it, if you cannot calculate the mathematical reasoning within the technique, cultivating hastily will accomplish nothing." Only then did the trio finally raise their heads. Reluctantly, they pulled their gazes away from the Golden Book. Qin Mu immediately asked, "Grandpa Village Chief, do you have confidence in repairing your divine bridge?" Village Chief shook his head slowly. "I do not have much lifespan remaining. Whether I can repair my divine bridge before old age claims my life will depend on fate. From the three techniques recorded in this book, repairing the divine bridge is by no means an easy task. Eternal Peace." Imperial Preceptor nodded. "Before anything else, we must first calculate the mathematical reasoning contained within these three techniques. This point is extremely important. We must construct the algebra model as soon as possible. Once that is achieved, we will be able to spread this knowledge." Cripple sneered coldly. "Imperial Preceptor, you wish to spread a technique that allows people to become gods and devils. But have you asked permission from the person of Carefree Village's Qin family? After all, these three techniques do not belong to you." Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor froze for a moment before speaking apologetically. "I was only thinking about whether this technique could or could not be spread, but I forgot to ask the owner, Cult Master Qin." Qin Mu smiled gently. I never planned to keep it for myself alone. I was already thinking that we should spread it widely as well. There is no need for me to keep it solely to myself." Eternal Peace, Imperial Preceptor, gazed deeply into his eyes, attempting to discern Qin-Mu's true intentions. Yet all he could see was Qin-Mu's incomparably clear gaze. He suddenly sighed. "Old Human Emperor, I finally understand why you chose him as your successor. He truly possesses the qualities and breadth of mind required of the Human Emperor. Though he is young, his mindset is vast enough. Mu'er was raised and taught by us, so of course his mindset is broad enough," Village Chief said calmly.